Thank you so much, Anshul. Thanks for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be with the Pepper team. Well, my journey started back in 2007, so it's been 16 years now. And it started with journalism, actually. So I did my master's in communication, and my first job was with the Times of India. I spent 4 years at the Times of India, and then I came back to do a short stint with them because they wanted me back. And so I've spent a total of about 5.5 years in journalism, mainly covering fashion. And, so obviously brands were even back then a very big part of my life. And then around 2012, when India was really at the cusp of the digital revolution, I decided to switch over because I was sensing that, print would probably not be the future. Already a lot of publications were shutting down. I was actually part of a publication that did shut down. I will not name it. And so I realized that, it was probably digital that is going to be the future. And I wanted to be ahead of the curve. So I made that switch and I moved to Mintra to head content for them. So I was responsible for their video content across YouTube as well as the fashion content on the blog. And then from Mintra, where I was their associate fashion director, I moved to Amazon as their fashion editor to set up social media for Amazon fashion in India. So that was really the mandate for which I was hired. And with Amazon, obviously, because there are global teams, and because the global teams have a certain way of doing fashion, they wanted to ensure that in India we stuck to what was truly Indian. So the sensibilities had to be very Indian. At the same time, it had to be a global brand, and the smart is beautiful proposition that Amazon Fashion is known for had to be carried throughout, right?
Right.
Post Amazon, I moved to the agency side. It was a very, very deliberate, decision. I had not experienced the agency things because I was always on the client side, right? And I realized that was like a gaping hole in my profile. And so when the opportunity with the Publicis Group came to me to be their creative director, as well as to basically sort of head the Bangalore functions for the Aditya Birla fashion brands, I took that opportunity up, spent 2 years there. And then Columbia Pacific Communities happened, and I thought it was a great opportunity to build something from scratch, which I hadn't done prior to that. I had always been part of really large brands that already had everything kind of set for them, and you basically just had to uh, run the show. So I think the excitement of setting up something from scratch and kind of really giving birth to a brand and sort of seeing it through and helping it grow from 0 to 1, I think was a very interesting opportunity from where I was in my career at that point in time. And I was also at that point very actively sort of looking for opportunities outside of fashion, because prior to that, I had spent a good 12 plus years doing fashion, So I realized that I was getting a little pigeonholed in fashion. And, I also wanted to challenge myself to see whether, I had a different perspective outside of fashion, whether I would be relevant in a category which was not fashion, So I think it was more to challenge myself as well that I took this up. And yeah, so I've been here for the last 4.5 years. Joined the organization at a time when the brand did not exist in India. It obviously had global presence, but it had no presence here in India. To now, when it is the category's largest, the country's most preferred um, senior living brand. So yeah, that's my journey. You know, I think marketing today is really so much about stories, right? It's so much about experiences. It's so much about creating narratives. I'm not saying that wasn't the case 15 years back, but I think today there is a lot more focus on that, right? And I think obviously the digital revolution has brought in a tremendous amount of change in marketing, not just the way in which we market, but also in the way in which consumers engage with brands today. So I think it's two-way. And I think that in the last 10, 15 odd years, I think the space has not only gotten a lot more competitive and cluttered, but I think that that's one way of looking at it. Obviously, it's gotten more competitive and cluttered, but also it's gotten a lot more efficient, and that is really all thanks to digital and digital automation, and which is really the future of marketing, right? I think today the power is equally in the hands of the consumer, and I think that to me is the biggest shift, right? Because if you looked at how brands were behaving, let's say 15 years back or 16 years back when I started out, it was more a one-way communication. Brands created communication which was fed to consumers. Whether you liked it or not as a consumer, you didn't really have a voice. Today you have a voice. So you are, an equal party in the relationship. And I think the voice is a very powerful voice. It is a voice of change. If you listen to that voice carefully, there's tremendous amount of insights that you can derive from it as marketers. And I think that today brands have realized that they can actually create communities with their end users. I think that's a big shift, right? So it's no longer really about selling. Obviously that's a big part of it, because that's really revenue and that's people's bread and butter. But it's also about creating communities and forging very meaningful relationships with end users, because where they become a part of your brand, right? They become a part of your decision making process, right? So they're no longer a passive entity, they become a very active entity, right? And I think that to me has been the biggest shift, obviously fueled by the digital transformation, right? I think marketing today is a lot more immediate. It's a lot more sort of here and now. I think reactions are immediate. Audience behavior is a lot more immediate. And and that then makes it extremely fast paced, right? And sometimes it's a challenge to really kind of keep pace. And sometimes you kind of do feel that machines would kind of outpace us, which they will. But I think that's really what evolution is about, in any field. And that's the way I have looked at the evolution in marketing.
Right.
So I think, first things first, right? Personally, I've always, as a marketer, believed in a content first approach, because I feel that, and I know this is a cliche, I know this is something everybody says, but if they say it, it's because it's true that content today is king. The only thing that differentiates you from everybody else in the category is the kind of content that you're able to produce. And the idea is to, I was reading the other day, or I think was it a video that I was watching? I can't quite remember. That said that um, about 30% of the content that you create as brand is the reason why people don't buy from you. You know, and it was a very, very interesting data point for me, because and I think they'd done a global survey and so on, and I mean, it sort of really got me thinking, because I think the idea is not to create content for the sake of content creation, which is something that I've said many times as well. And this is my favorite thing to really repeat, that it's not really about creating content for the sake of content creation because everybody else is doing it, and so you must do as well. But it's really about creating content that is serving a purpose. Now, what that purpose is something that you as a brand marketer, you as a product marketer should determine. Is it to educate? Is it to entertain? Is it to engage? Is it to convert? I mean, every piece of content will have its own objective, but the idea is really to create something that is attached to an objective, and the way to sort of see success in this is to really ask yourself very fundamental questions. about who am I as a brand, right? And what is my purpose as a brand in this world, right? What is it that I'm trying to solve for? Every brand today is trying to solve for a customer pain point or multiple customer pain points at the same time. And I think the idea is to really acknowledge what is at the core of your brand and then start from there, right? I think that really should be the starting point. It is not about saying that, oh, everybody is on metaverse, so I should have a metaverse strategy. It is about saying, is that something that will make sense for me? Is that something that will make sense for my consumers, right? And I think that if you have got that North Star right, if you have been able to sort of determine that as your sort of guiding star, I think everything else will fall into place. I'm not saying you will not make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes and learns. I'm sure we've all been there and continue to make mistakes and learn. But the idea is to sort of do it for the right reasons and do content that resonates not just with who you are as a brand and why you exist, but also with the audience and their pulse, right? So yeah. Look, AI is going to affect everything, you know. Let's first understand that, right? AI is going to affect healthcare, AI is going to affect manufacturing, AI is going to affect travel, AI is going to affect everything, right? It is the present and the future. There is no running away from that. And the sooner we sort of look at it as a friend as opposed to a foe, I think the better it is for us, right? I I do not really know whether AI will replace us. I hope not, and I do not think so. AI will compel us to be smarter. Yes, AI will compel us to use AI for our benefits. But will it replace, human beings and human talent? I don't think so, right? So I don't know if we should sort of look at it as a real threat, today. And this obviously has reference to all the chatter that's going on about chat gpt and Google's Bard and so on and so forth. Today there is chat gpt, tomorrow I'm sure there will be something else, right? And there's no stopping it. The idea is, how do you use chat gpt, right? And I think that as far as marketing is concerned, what AI will certainly do and has already started doing is making it a lot more efficient, faster, cheaper. Most importantly, it is definitely helping marketers save big bucks by able to predict, everything from what is going to convert better to at what point will your customer convert, to audience behavior on your website, basis which you will take certain decisions and so on, right? So I think because AI is going to really be able to automate a lot of things, and for example, ads would sort of run on their own and human beings don't have to run ads themselves, it'll basically leave us with a lot of time to do bigger things, better things, and sort of contribute more holistically, right? I think that what AI will also do is, in many ways, obviously, is change audience behavior, right? So we will have to actually think a couple of steps ahead and predict how audiences are going to evolve and their behavior is going to evolve, and how they're going to forge this sort of new relationship with brands, and what is the role that brands can play. And I think finally what I do want to say is that um, even in the future when AI is going to be sort of let's say unmissable, right? I think there is no substituting human touch, right? In any category, in any product, there is absolutely no substituting human touch and that human connection. Brands will have to continue to humanize themselves in order to build those meaningful relationships with people, because ultimately what matters is that, I mean, it's very easy to automate everything today. In our own houses we have a Siri that takes orders and does things. We have ads being run by machines. We have at every level, there is intervention from a machine, right? And I think that is why there is greater need to kind of humanize interactions, and really, really sort of look at authenticity, look at being genuine and true to who you are. And honestly, as brands, I think walking the talk, and trying to sort of build that very real connection in a world which is very, very machine driven, I think is going to be more and more important. So I think that to me is the most important thing. Well, I think I'm really kind of, I mean, look, I can give you the sort of straight answer of what a marketing stack today is like, which is your usuals, right? Your SEO, SEM, website, social media, landing pages, etc., which is what I think every marketer uses, and that will continue to be used, right, even in the future. But since you asked me about future, and since this is more about my fantasy really for the future, I think that I'm kind of getting quite interested in the whole sort of neuromarketing space, and sort of behavioral sciences and marketing. Rory Sutherland, who I think a lot of people have heard of, and is the vice president at Ogilvy in the UK. I've read a lot of his books. He's an ad man that I have the deepest admiration for, and he talks a lot about behavioral sciences and how marketers really, really need to focus on behavioral sciences more than anything else, because that ultimately is what your consumers are about, right? And I think if there was a tool that could sort of give you insight into you know not just the regular consumer behavior that today you already have access to, right? Let's say with your research and a lot of other tools, but really what the consumer is going to need, let's say 2 years from now, 5 years from now, which the consumer himself probably has not realized, and sort of give marketers a sort of sneak peek into that, and how behaviors will change and continue to change, and how that will then impact product and product innovation and product development. I think that to me is going to be a very, very integral part of that fantasy stack that I would want access to, because ultimately, consumers are human beings, and human beings are about behavior. And if you've been able to decode that, and if you've been able to really get to the bottom of how human beings behave and why they want what they want, and what drives those wants, and what drives those aspirations and those needs, in a sort of tech driven manner, I think if it was done in a more scientific manner, I think that would be an interesting thing to have in my stack. And who knows, maybe in the next couple of years that's going to be possible as well. Maybe there'll be a behavioral sciences tool that we could probably use.